Welcome to the Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lacey.
And I'm Melanie Dellis. On this episode, we're going to show you how the number 13 got such a bad rap.
The number 13 really does have some baggage attached to it, and not all of it is deserving. We as a society may like to think that we aren't superstitious, like people from the ancient times or even the Middle Ages, but in fact, we all still do a lot of things that stem from the superstitions of our ancestors. And the number 13 falls right in there with the evil eye amulets, black cats, and knocking on wood.
That's very true. Like, we do so many superstitious things. Like, I know I do.
I do.
Yeah, I do the knocking on wood, the salt throwing over your left shoulder if you spill it.
Except for the black cat thing, because I have a black cat.
I don't do the black cat.
Because in Ireland, black cats are actually lucky.
Well, see, that's a thing. And that's why I was really excited when we chose this topic today, was because there are some things that aren't really unlucky, like the black cats. And you know what else I won't do is the walking under the ladder. Like, even when we were at the museum, our client museum
I was doing the same thing. I was like, Melanie, I'm not walking on that ladder. I actually pulled it out when you were about ready to do it on the other side. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
And I, like, for a split second, I was like, is she going to think that I am just dumb and like wasting time for trying to move this ladder? And I was like, I don't care. I'm not walking under it.
It was the opposite for me. I was like, is she really going to walk under a ladder right underneath like all this stuff going on? I'm like, I don't think so. Let's move this ladder.
Heck no. I don't, just in case. Why take a chance?
Right.
All right, but let's focus on 13. Many people avoid this number, considering it to be bad luck, like the other things we mentioned. And many, many people have a genuine fear of it that doctors from as far back as 1911 named trichidecaphobia. It comes from the Greek tri, T-R-I-S, which means 3, chi, which means and, deca, which means 10, and phobia, meaning fear. According to the U.S. National Institute of Mental Health, 75% of people with specific phobias receive successful treatment using cognitive behavioral therapy, and people suffering from trichidecaphobia are no different. So there is still hope for all of you trichidecaphobia patients. I don't want to say that word anymore.
That's a long word.
Trichidecaphobia.
And I would have said it triskidecaphobia.
Okay, so originally, that's what my brain wanted to do too, because it's T-R-I-S. But because I know Greek like the numbers, well, I don't know Greek. Let's rephrase that. I know the numbers, the basic numbers.
So you know numbers in Greek.
And the number 3 is tri. Yeah. Because I remember, oh God, now it's people who are Greek listening to this are going to be like, you dummy, it's tris. But I'm pretty sure it's
too late now.
It's not tri, it's tree. Trichidecaphobia, now that I'm thinking back. So I think I said it wrong originally. It's called trichidecaphobia. Because I remember teaching my kid the numbers. Why is it tree? Why is it like a tree, But it's tree. Trichidecaphobia. And I just said I wasn't going to say it anymore, and I said it like 16 more times.
You're about ready to have a fear of saying that word.
There's
got to be a phobia for saying phobias, right? Well, anyway, why would people have a fear of a number? That's so crazy.
It is.
It was thought the origin of the unlucky 13 came from the Christian belief that 13 people sat down at the Last Supper, and Judas was the first to leave the table to betray his master, Jesus. So for centuries, hosts avoided having 13 people seated around a dining table, convinced that the first person to leave would die within the year.
My.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, 16th century witch hunters often tried to claim that people they arrested had 13 at a gathering, which was proof that the accused were witches in league with the devil.
There's so much out there written about these crazy witch hunters and like what they were like using as criteria. And this is the first time I ever heard about this, but that makes total sense. But does it? Because isn't there supposed to be 12 witches in a coven? So wouldn't it really be...
I think you have to have a minimum of a certain number and then like the maximum of a different number.
Okay, so because I was going to say, wouldn't he be looking for 12 people for a witch's coven instead of 13? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I think I don't know too much about covens, which reminds me that's probably one we should probably do a thing on.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I just know a little bit.
All right. Well, we'll do some investigating.
Yeah, let's
Maybe that'll be one of our next ones because that's kind of a cool topic too. All right, but the fear of the number 13 predates Christianity. The number 13 has been considered unlucky for millennia and by many different cultures around the world. The ancient Romans believed that 13 was a bad omen, foretelling ill fortune and death for reasons we could not find in our immediate research. The Vikings also hated 13 because in Norse mythology, a banquet was held for 12 gods at which the trickster Loki showed up uninvited. When he saw everyone was there having a party for the gods and he wasn't invited, he had Hoder, the blind god of darkness, shoot Balder, the beautiful, who was the god of joy, with a mistletoe-tipped arrow. Poor Hoder didn't realize what he had done, being blind and all, until it was too late and Balder died, leaving Earth covered in darkness. A very unlucky day indeed. Doesn't this tale sound kind of similar to the Last Supper and Judas?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, just with like the people
Just
and
a
the
tiny
dinner
bit.
and the party. Maybe the reasons for like Loki versus Judas are
The
different.
reasons are different, but the circumstances seem eerily similar.
Yeah, just like so many things with connecting different religions and things like that. There's some overlap.
Exactly.
Well, no matter how old this dislike of 13 is, modern people are still going with it. In fact, many architects purposefully don't put a 13th floor in their elevators, airports skip gate 13, and hospitals and hotels sometimes don't even have a room 13. In Florence, Italy, they pull a Harry Potter on their addresses, skipping 13 and instead using 12 and a half. Or maybe it should be 12 and 3/4.
Yeah, it should be 12 and 3/4.
But what if you're having a party and for whatever reason, only 13 people RSVP? Well, if you were in the turn of the century France, you'd have called the quatorzins, which is French for 14ers. Apparently, a group of socialites at this time had a brilliant business idea of marketing themselves for hire as a 14th guest. So dinner parties and guests wouldn't suffer from bad luck.
I think that is an awesome idea. Like,
they saw a niche and they went for it. That's great. And they get invited to parties. How cool is that? And they probably get paid for it too.
Yeah, they definitely got paid. Yeah, they were for hire. And I think that people would still hire them in modern times, I bet. Like, how many times do people not want to go alone to a party?
Oh my gosh, right.
You know, and even if it's just bringing a girlfriend or bringing a guy friend
sometimes it's just like,
whatever.
Can you just walk into the door with me and then you can leave? I just need someone to walk in the door.
Just walk in the door, and like if you're really shy and this is a networking event, right? And you don't know anyone, then how helpful would it be to have this person who is more outgoing and like tell them, I'm really shy, like just help me break the ice and getting in and like help me talk to these people.
Yes.
I would totally hire someone
I totally
like
would
that.
too. There's like 2 or 3 times you and I've had to go to like random networking events. And I'm like, both of us, like,
we're frozen in fear.
We're
We
frozen.
have
We don't know
no
what to
idea
do.
how to talk to these people.
I know.
Yes, if someone's listening, we're in San Diego. Start that business. We'll hire you. We have a couple networking things every year. So anyway, the first written record we have of the number 13 and Friday being unlucky with it only dates from the 19th century in Henry Sutherland Edwards' 1869 biography of Italian composer Gioacchino Rossini. Quote, he, Rossini, was surrounded to the last by admiring friends, and if it be true that, like so many Italians, he regarded Fridays as an unlucky day and 13 as an unlucky number, it is remarkable that on Friday the 13th of November he passed away. End quote.
But it wasn't just famous Italian composers who thought 13 was unlucky. Many other famous people joined in. Franklin Delano Roosevelt really didn't like 13 and would never sit at a table if he would be the 13th. That's when those quadratorizans, right, would have come in handy.
Yeah.
Mark Twain and Napoleon felt the same way as FDR. And surprisingly, so does Stephen King. Actually, you know what? That's not that surprising.
It's not?
No, it's Stephen King.
I mean, I would have thought he wouldn't be afraid of anything, not superstitious about anything, because he writes all those scary books.
But I would say, not knowing this person in any way, shape, or form, I would say that he has a healthy fear of some of these superstitions. I don't know. I'm just saying. So to me,
maybe
this one
he
makes
writes about it because that's his way of overcoming these fears he's always had.
Maybe.
Ooh.
I mean, or he just has a really good imagination, and sometimes the only way to get those things out is to talk about it. But I have absolutely no basis in fact. But to me, it's not that surprising that he'd have this issue with the number 13. I mean, so much of superstition we in the U.S. have just put on like Friday the 13th being this bad day. And honestly, I always think Friday the 13th is the best day because you have to watch some scary movie and sit at home and eat pizza or something.
Right.
Well, anyway, it's funny to think of the famous horror author's superstitions like that, but he did say that, quote, when I am writing, I'll never stop work if the page is number 13 or multiple of 13. I'll just keep on typing until I get to a safer number, end quote.
A safe number.
See, I'm saying it makes sense. I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I just never thought about someone like him being afraid of something like that. But it does make sense. But we can't talk about unlucky number 13 without touching on why Friday the 13th also gets a bad rap.
Which is like usually the best day of the year for me, but
Right.
that's fine.
Well, this one bugs me too because so many people nowadays say Friday the 13th is unlucky and they won't fly on that day for fear of the plane crashing and all these other things. But really, it maybe could be considered unlucky if you happen to be one of the Knights Templar or a descendant, but that's kind of stretching it, I think. Those poor guys shared a horrible fate beginning on Friday, October 13th, 1307.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, I can get it. I get it now. Yeah, I forgot about that specific date. You're right.
Yeah. Here's a history quickie. The Knights Templar was a monastic military order founded in 1118 in Europe. Their purpose was to protect the pilgrims who were traveling to the Holy Land following the Christian capture of Jerusalem during the First Crusade. Many people loved them and gave them riches and thanks, which, by the early 1300s, they used to build castles, churches, and banks across all of Western Europe.
Unfortunately, King Philip IV of France was financially strapped and came up with a plan to accuse the knights of black magic and various scandals in order to steal their riches and lands. He had 600 knights arrested, charged with heresy, devil worship, spitting on the cross, homosexuality, fraud, and financial corruption. They were tortured for weeks, which led to false confessions. Pope Clement, although horrified by what the king was doing, couldn't stop anything once the knights began confessing. However, once some of them began recanting their confessions, the Pope forced the torture to stop in early 1308. They weren't released, though. 2 years later, in 1310, King Philip burned more than 50 knights at the stake, and 2 years after that, the Pope dissolved the order. The last of the Templars were burned at the stake in the spring of 1314.
So you see, unless you are perhaps a descendant of a Templar, Friday the 13th shouldn't be unlucky for you. But that doesn't stop millions of people from having that fear. It's estimated that in the U.S. alone, as much as $900 million is lost in business every Friday the 13th. It's become so bad that you can go to the Stress Management Center and Phobia Institute in Asheville, North Carolina, which will help you conquer your Friday the 13th fear, which apparently afflicts almost 21 million people in the United States alone. Oh my gosh. So I totally hope that this Stress Management Center and Phobia Institute in North Carolina gets bombarded with the 21 million people who have this fear now, because they're all listening to this podcast right now. And they're going to be like, oh my God, I had no idea that we could go there and get treatment.
I wonder if some of that stress and phobia comes from the movie franchise, Halloween the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
The movie franchise. I'm sorry. I always get those two mixed up. But
well, they're basically the same.
They're basically
Let's face it.
Right. But like Friday the 13th and all the, it is like a little on the scary side.
Right, it is. And I think that is a perfect example of how the media influences the generations. Would people really be that superstitious about Friday the 13th had that movie series
I would
never
love to see.
Been created?
Exactly.
And
I'd like to see
by
the
media.
I'd love to see like the data on that, to say like pre the movies and post the movies, if there is that information out there.
Right. In modern times, at least, because we know they were superstitious back then.
As we've discussed today. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow the Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at the Unusual History of Everything, and on Facebook at the Unusual History of Everything podcast. And find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for the Unusual History of Everything.
Da, 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 da.